Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. I'm Pamela Schaff. I'm the director of USC's Heal and Narrative Medicine programs, and I am delighted to welcome you to today's capstone presentations by our graduating master's students. The work you'll see today represents our students' summative experience in the program. Each student has examined a topic inspired by the principles of narrative medicine, that draws on many elements of their coursework and learning throughout the program. I want to acknowledge first the commitment of our narrative medicine faculty who have served as advisors and mentors for our students. Erica Wright, also Associate Director of the program, Kairos Lobrera, who's our Community Engagement Director as well, Ronan Hallowell, Lynn Boyd-Judson, Emily Ziemer, Abby Rasminsky, and Jonathan Zhao. Thank you for all of your guidance. I also want to thank our program administrator, Paige Tonks, and our program assistant, Jimena Patino Perez, for all of their support of our students and for today's event. Just a few words about narrative medicine for those of you who may be unfamiliar with the field. Narrative medicine is a clinical practice, a method, and an interdisciplinary field of study that centers individual and community stories in the service of health and social justice. Dr. Rita Sharon, who's the originator of the field, says, along with their scientific expertise, doctors need the expertise to listen to their patients, to understand as best they can the ordeals of illness, to honor the meanings of their patients' narratives of illness, and to be moved by what they behold so that they can act on their patients' behalf. She defines narrative medicine as clinical practice fortified by narrative competence, the capacity to recognize, absorb, metabolize, interpret, and be moved by stories of illness. Simply, it is medicine practiced by someone who knows what to do with stories. By supporting self-reflection and providing a framework for attending to the stories of others, narrative medicine can help students and scholars and clinicians in their efforts to transform the health of individuals and communities and contribute to more just health care systems. Narrative medicine works in a range of settings as a tool for building community, developing a practice of self-reflection, and becoming open to other points of view. Today, our students will share the diverse ways in which they have used narrative medicine's principles and methods to reflect on their own roles and experiences in personal and professional domains, to illuminate aspects of caregiving, and to contribute to the education of health professionals in training, ultimately making a difference in the lives of patients and clinicians and caregivers. We're going to have two groups of presentations, each followed by a Q&A. And we'll start with Brandon Cho, who will discuss his memoir project called Rupture, Kinship in the Wake of Trauma.
Hello, everyone. My name is Brandon Cho. As some of you might know, or most of you don't, I'm currently an undergraduate student at USC, finishing up my degree in English, as well as finishing or being a candidate for this program to also finish next week. And I'll also be attending USC Gould School of Law come fall, so fight on. As a triple Trojan now, though, I thought it was important to sort of show an accumulation of what I've learned thus far and a sort of metabolization of my experiences at US. So in order to do that, I think it's important to take it back to the beginning. My first day at USC was with an eccentric professor named David Roman. And I was 10 minutes late because I couldn't find the classroom for the life of me. And when I walked in, he asked me a question. He was like, "What's your worldview?" And I think I tried to give an over-intellectualized response about grit and perseverance that was plagiarized from a TED Talk that I watched a while ago. He didn't like it, and he told me to submit a better one. But what he told me his worldview was one of tragedy. And I thought that was a pretty depressing way to start off my college experience. But he later defined that for me. He said that tragedy to him, or the tragic, was the ubiquitous response in people in reaction to loss, suffering, or grief. And I thought that was really interesting because, in his words, everybody experiences the tragic in one form or another, whether that's losing a friend, losing a home, displacement, migration, anything of the sort. And that stuck with me for the next 4 years through my research and writings, but what I was really more interested in was the idea of kinship that he talked about. And kinship, to Rahman, was a condition that allowed people to persevere through the tragic by finding community. And that was really interesting to me and beautiful as well. But what I was more interested in was how that kinship came to be. If it was such, a universal, unifying force, I was interested in the formation of that. So going into loss, a lot of people have asked me why narrative medicine, seeing as how it's primarily a clinical field. And to that, I would say I took a class with Professor Wright, and I was like, this sounds interesting. What is it about? She said it's about storytelling and advocacy and how to be a more emphatic listener and how to properly pay attention to people's stories. And I thought that was important for the law, seeing as how the law is primarily a place for advocacy as well. So coming into narrative medicine, I found kinship to be a topic of conversation as well. So I decided to make that the topic of my capstone. So a little bit of theoretical grounding for the work. Kinship in its traditional sense, as I'm sure a lot of you guys have heard it, is one of biological determinism. But a while ago, the sort of father of kinship, David Schneider, said that kinship needs to deviate from the more Western model of biological determinism and shift more towards something that unifies kinship across different cultures. So to that end, Christine Torin and Simone Powell's did some interesting work in the Pacific Islands regarding kinship and its formation, particularly through rituals and tradition, things like eating practices, family name calling, and as well as death and mourning. So that was important work as well. Robert A. Wilson was definitely a formative author in my work as well. He talks about homeostatic property clusters, basically saying that the biological isn't completely mutually exclusive from the social, saying that kinship exists both within its traditional Western form, as well as through the more social kinning model, kinning being defined as sort of the process through which kinship comes to be, particularly in the face of the tragic. And yeah, so my primary methodology for the work was of practice-based research, which is to say that works apart from the quantitative, things like literature and art and theater can all contribute to as data in different forms of research of the human condition. Anything that describes the lived experiences of others, whether that's of grief, of loss, or of anything regarding or the topic of inquiry, I guess, can be used and is valuable. So to that end, I'm using On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous by Ocean Vuong, which is a novel, not a memoir, and as well as Philip Roth's Patrimony, as well as Maxine Hon Kingston's The Woman Warrior. The latter two are Asian American memoirs focusing on loss and absence and how to triangulate grief and kinning during that process. And I'm also using a fourth source, an autoethnographic collection of scenes and chapters from my own life in order to show and demonstrate, hopefully, a unique perspective into how kinning can form in a particularly tumultuous familial environment. So I guess not sure how much time has passed, but I'll hop into a reading of that. If it's all right with everyone. Please laugh when appropriate. just like that. My first and last therapist ever was a guy that, for the sake of anonymity, I'm going to call Joe. And I really hope there are no Joes in the audience because Joe's voice was really Joe-ish. It was kind of unbelievable. He was a really tired looking guy with glasses that hung also precariously off the tip of his nose while he scratched things down in order to show me later just how much growth I'd achieved since my first ever session with him. A growth that he immortalized through my pre-therapy survey. Quote, in the past month, have you wished you were dead or thought you'd be better off dead? Have you ever felt so hopeless you wished you could die? Have you ever felt unsafe or afraid at home? Have you ever felt threatened by someone you love or care about? And don't get me wrong, I don't actually think the survey questions were all that bad. But when Joe pulled out a graph on what would be my last day with him, showing me a very, very strong negative slope, and he looked really genuinely proud that I had seemingly improved so much since my first day there, I did start to wonder about his medical qualifications. He did work in one of the largest hospitals in Southern California that I won't name, but if this guy thought that I went from an 8 to a 2 on he needs to be medicated before he offs himself scale, he works in a great place. That isn't to say, though, that it was all bad. See, the one good thing I did get from Joe, and maybe it's the only thing that mattered, was the concept of kintsugi. For those of you who are unaware, kintsugi is the Japanese art of mending broken pottery by using molten gold, silver, or other pretty metals to fill in the cracks and reconstruct it into something beautiful. During my time with Joe, I really did think it was another waste of my time and effort to think about, alongside the Calm meditation app, which he told me I should download roughly 20 times. I finally folded one day, and lo and behold, the narrator of the Calm app was definitely named Joe. It was a very fast delete. Kintsugi, though, comes from a mindset in Japan called wabi-sabi. Wabi-sabi is the acceptance of impermanence and imperfection. And for a while there, Joe had me thinking that kintsugi should be applied to myself. And I didn't really agree with that completely because I wasn't a broken guy. I knew everything that was wrong with me, and it was pretty minor. WebMD told me as much. But I was just there for a very distraught mother's consolation. But I grew up more, and I began unraveling who I was in relation to my family, as well as my past. And kintsugi started to make a whole lot more sense, viewing kintsugi as a practice of making my family again. But to view a family as a cup, and a delicate one at that, it comes with its own set of risks. Because I tried kintsugi one time, albeit not with molten gold or silver, because I'm a college student, but caulk, Caulk, served pretty much the same purpose though. And when I tell you I didn't achieve wabi-sabi, I do mean that sincerely. The cup in question was a piece of crap $2 ceramic cup from Goodwill. And it had a weird stain in the middle that I couldn't wash out. And it was a weird brownish red color, which made me question its origins. And it was lifted just enough for me to wonder whether it was like a starving artist's design choice. But needless to say, it shattered on the floor pretty well. And I sat there with it for what was probably beyond the reasonable amount of time, trying to assemble those pieces with a small brush of caulk, which turns out was a horrible idea. So I switched to a butter knife, which only served to mar and chip this teacup even further. But at the end of the great ordeal, I was left with Frankenstein's cup. It was a gray and off-white monstrosity, and that was somehow uglier than when I first got it. Though I'm pretty sure it would have looked better in gold, to be fair. I didn't try drinking anything from the cup, mostly out of fear of some poisoning. But in the process, 3 years down the line, as I sat now in my family home, desperately wishing I was anywhere but here, it meant something to me now. See, my family made for a shitty cup. It was imperfect and overly violent, and there were times when I think it's left a weird stain on who I am around others. But if family's a cup, and I have time and have the willingness to sit down and not throw the cup against the wall when it inevitably crumbles to pieces, and I've got caulk on my hands, then maybe that in of itself can count for something. And thanks for listening.
Next up is Blaine Verhane, whose project is called Nightingale, Caregiving, Illness, and What We Owe Each Other.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Blaine Verhane. I'm a pre-med student and a graduating master's student in the narrative medicine master's program. And I chose to write a play script for my capstone project. So Nightingale is a original 2-act play about caregiving, illness, family history, and what happens when care becomes necessary inside a relationship that's already complicated. So the questions that guided this capstone were, what do we owe each other in times of illness? What does the past do to caregiving? And how does the act of caregiving change a relationship between two people? And I was interested in care not as something that was automatically pure or healing, but as something that can be multifaceted and loving and frustrating and morally complicated. And in the play, caregiving is never a neutral act. It's shaped by love and obligation and memory and sometimes resentment. So the premise of the play is it follows our protagonist, Amaya, who works in a skilled nursing facility, and she's pulled out of that job by her father, who she's estranged from, who's had a stroke and is dealing with the effects of Parkinson's disease. And so she's pulled back into this relationship with her father and has to move back into her childhood home to take care of him. And the illness forces them into a new kind of intimacy, which forces Amaya to confront what she owes him now and what their past makes difficult to give him. So there's 4 settings in this play, and each of the rooms kind of change what care means for Amaya. The skilled nursing facility, there are roles, routines, and expectations, and she feels a sense of competence there. And then we move into her childhood home, which carries a lot of history and has her returning to old versions of herself and old relationships. The hospital is a sort of neutral battleground for her and Lincoln, and it's where they sort of, at the start of their reconnection and towards the end of Act 2, are forced to renegotiate the terms of their relationship. And then Grace, Amaya's partner, represents Amaya's chosen life, the life she's built outside of her father. But as Lincoln's needs grow, the props and the settings from Lincoln's home bleed into the other settings in the play. All right, so we've got a strong cast here. Amaya is our protagonist. She is smart, driven, and capable. She is also very emotionally guarded and impatient, which leads to some very controversial decisions throughout this play. She's good at managing crises that belong to other people. She's just not always the most introspective. And the play forces her into a form of caregiving that's both intimate and unwanted for her. And Lincoln, her father, is a veteran and a father in the most 1950s traditional sense of the word. He's a provider and a disciplinarian and slightly emotionally absent. But he believes deeply in self-sufficiency and order and has built his identity around being the kind of man that doesn't need help. And his Parkinson's disease and recent stroke have kind of shattered that self-concept. But he's incredibly charismatic and very witty, but he can be very blunt and defensive when he's ashamed. And he is very distrustful of the medical establishment, which we see throughout the play, which makes him somewhat difficult to care for. And then Diane, who my playwriting professor had me do this exercise where I had one sentence to describe each character as I was trying to learn who these characters were. And I just wrote, imagine if Florence Nightingale is from the Bronx. And that is her. She is a veteran nurse. She runs her corner of the facility with efficiency. She has very little tolerance for nonsense. And she spent enough years in medicine to know how much invisible labor it takes to keep things running. And she's a mentor to Amaya, and she represents a version of caregiving that's practiced and durable and sometimes costly. And then we have Michael, who's our youngest patient at the nursing facility. He's in his 30s. He's dealing with the effects of a traumatic brain injury that he sustained from a drunk driving accident. We have Henry, who is a charismatic grouch with renal failure, who still knows how to dominate a room very, very quickly. And then Cassandra, who is a patient dealing with schizophrenia. And she kind of sits at the edge of realism in the play and has these episodes that sometimes actually end up predicting events accurately in the play, but no one ends up listening to her at all. But yeah, they all make for quite an eccentric cast. Just to give you guys an idea of what the tone of the play is, I wanted to arrange for a reading. I was going to have us read, for the purposes of time, just part of the scene where Amaya and Lincoln meet in the hospital for the first time after years of estrangement. Bright, would you be willing to volunteer or voluntold? Thank you so much. There are expletives in this play. If you are comfortable, feel free to skip them. For the highlighted section is where I'm going to have you start. And then there's a line that's highlighted at the end for where you'll stop.
Okay. We're
So,
reading this.
My link.
Yeah, this is a cold reading.
Amaya.
Do you have a strong feeling?
Who would you prefer first?
I'll have you do the role of Lincoln and you do the role of Maya.
You have to be grouchy
Sure.
and
Yeah.
I have to be.
You have full creative control.
Or I'm scoffing.
Okay.
Stage directions.
Oh, wait, should we be over here so you can, okay.
Read the stage, or you want to read the stage too?
Oh, yeah, you should read. the
Sure,
stage
yes.
Okay.
Okay, so this is set interior in Lincoln's hospital room. Amaya stands near the door as Lincoln sits up in his bed. They stare at each other awkwardly for a moment before Lincoln decides to break the ice.
Took you a while.
Jesus. What do you too?
Traffic?
I was at work. How are you feeling?
Like I got hit by a semi.
So mostly yourself then.
You look tired.
Thank you.
Wasn't an insult.
I know.
Doc says they want me in a home.
Yeah, they
I'm
said,
not doing that.
okay.
Okay?
Did you want me to wrestle you onto a gurney myself or?
Serious.
All right. Why are you?
These people, those places are for people who are at the end of the line.
No, they're for people who need help. And honestly, you need.
I'm not staying in a damn facility.
Okay. It's not like I invented them.
Work in one.
As an administrator,
Same difference.
it is in fact not.
You know what I mean.
Do I?
People crocheting their life away, someone half my age telling me where I can piss.
Well, that's a vivid concern to lead with.
Do you think this is funny?
No, I just think you say dumb shit when you're scared.
I'm not scared.
Sure.
Don't do that.
Do what?
Roll up in here after all this time, acting like you know me.
I do know you.
The doctor made it sound like I was dying.
Were you hoping I wouldn't come unless there was a body bag involved?
Don't be dramatic.
You had a stroke, Lincoln.
Jesus, so now I'm Lincoln?
Dad? Feels a little ceremonial given the circumstances.
You still mad at me?
You really want to do this, like now?
I just asked the question. I called you.
The hospital called.
Same difference.
Again, not really.
I gave them your number.
Why?
Well, who else was I going to call?
I don't know. One of your drinking buddies? The ghost of John Wayne? What happened to that woman you were seeing? Rachel? Ruth?
Rose, and I'm not seeing her anymore.
Oh,
They say I can't be by myself for a while.
yeah,
Ridiculous.
probably.
You agreeing with me or humoring me?
Do you want honesty or comfort? I can only do one at a time.
Honestly.
You're sick and you're shit at taking care of yourself. So your shit is becoming my shit and everything is just shit.
You practiced that on the way over here?
Shut up.
I'm serious. You've given this a lot of thought?
No, obviously not. Who thinks about shit like this?
Why did you come?
I got a call and they said it was urgent.
That all?
Is that not enough?
You don't have to stay.
I know.
They keep asking me who's taking me home.
And what do you keep saying?
That Lorraine damn near drives herself.
You still drive that piece of shit?
Don't talk about her that way. She's the most reliable.
She's 2 oil changes away from combustion.
That's not true. I take great care of her.
We had to push it all the way up the hill by Primrose because she would just give up every time.
Well, I don't see how that's fair. Hills shouldn't be that steep. That's the fault of the poor city planning.
How does she even make it past inspection?
I have my ways.
Awesome.
Thank you, playwrights.
That is the first time I've heard that read out loud. Thank you so much. Dr. Wright, I did not mean to make you say that many expletives in one sitting. Apologies. Amazing. Awesome. Thank you guys so much. Now that you guys have a sense of the story world and the tone of the play, I wanted to explain a little bit more about the research process that went into it. So one of the main frameworks for this project is practice-based research. In simple terms, practice-based research means that the creative practice itself is part of the research method. So the play is not just the final product that comes at the end result of the research. Writing the play is one of the ways that I investigated the research question of what we owe each other in times of illness. So instead of asking, what do scholars say about caregiving? Well, I did ask, what do scholars say about caregiving? But in addition to that, I'm also asking, what can writing and developing real people into the script teach me about caregiving that theory might not be able to do alone? So a theoretical essay about caregiving is relational, explains that caregiving is relational and ethically complex, but a scene can show what that complexity can feel like in real time with layered personalities. And so the pauses and the interruptions, the jokes, the discomfort, and the small negotiations between the characters was a way that I was able to explore this concept. So yeah, the script kind of acts as an artistic object and then also its own form of inquiry. Yeah, so Lincoln's stroke in the play is medically important, but the play is less about the stroke as a diagnosis and more about what the stroke reveals about him as a character. And it exposes the structure of his and Amaya's relationship over the course of the play. And so in that way, illness and the stroke are a narrative disruption. So Arthur Frank's restitution narrative and chaos narrative were both incredibly helpful in developing the character of Lincoln and his adjustments to his condition as it worsens over the course of the play. The concept of embodiment from Correll's phenomenology of illness was really important to me in understanding how the characters' physical bodies and their literal time that they spend with each other affect the way that they approach each other's dependence, and the way the illness can reorganize their relationship to the four settings that I had described earlier. And then the care ethics that I had researched, Joan Tronto and Carol Gillian were incredibly helpful in defining care as an ethical labor as opposed to a beneficial act that one might provide. And the 5 main tenets that I had pulled from them were that dependency is normal and not exceptional, but that people may not always react the way that they're supposed to in that context, and that care is relational. Care isn't just a task one performs for someone else. It involves both people in a two-sided dynamic. And the third is that care involves power. The caregiver often has more control, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the caregiver feels powerful. And oftentimes, especially in the context of this play, the caregiver can feel quite trapped. And Lincoln, who needs help, still has an emotional power over her as a result of their shared history. The 4th tenet was that good care requires attentiveness. So paying attention to what the other person actually needs and not just what we assume they need. And then the 5th tenet was that care has limits. And we see that through Amaya and Diane as well, that care ethics doesn't necessarily mean endless sacrifice. And that's really important to Amaya when she's trying to figure out what she owes her father as he's going on this illness journey. And so care ethics was really helpful in having us avoid treating caregiving as a automatically noble act, and instead seeing it as something that's much more nuanced and layered. And then the concept that I found incredibly helpful in the world of theater was narrative humility. Recognizing that we'll never fully understand someone's story, which in a clinical practice is incredibly important, but I actually found really interesting in the world of theater, and I think kind of draws into how this writing in the world of drama can be helpful in the narrative medicine context. You're not allowed to really understand anything other than what the characters physically do or what they say out loud. And so there's no inner thought process that you're allowed to follow. And so you kind of have to take them at their word and understand as much nuance as you can from their actions and from their words as opposed to their innermost thoughts. And so that was really helpful in exploring caretaking as a responsibility, because she makes a lot of decisions that we may not agree with and that we may judge in real time. But as a result of the play, you end up caring about her quite a lot by the end. Yeah, I know we're over time. Thank you guys so much. I'll move us to the Q&A. Let's stay up here.
Yeah. Why don't you come up, Brandon, as well? Questions for Brandon or for Blaine? Teresa.
I'm curious if you have a favorite character, if there was a character that you found yourself kind of being with more than the others.
I loved writing Henry so much. He makes me so excited to be old. I think there's an age where you stop caring really what a lot of people's opinions are of you. So that one was really fun to write. The character that probably surprised me the most was Lincoln. I think he changed a lot as the writing process went on. And I grew to care a lot more about him than I did when I started writing. So.
Personal experience already.
Yeah. I mean, lots of personal experience. I chose not to make the play too autobiographical. It kind of started that way, and I was like, maybe we should age the main character up and change the caregiving dynamic. I grew up caregiving for my brother, who had nonverbal autism and Down syndrome. And I also thought it would be more interesting to see that in a parent-child dynamic than a sibling dynamic. But yeah, I mean, many of those things that you heard up here are conversations that I've had in real time. So, yeah.
Saw your text about stairs, couch, and it's interesting that there's text in settings in both of your setting. I'm wondering, we didn't get to hear too much about your other chapters about stairways and couches, but does this focus on setting influence the work that you're doing? I would love to hear a bit more.
Yeah.
Talk about those chapters.
Yeah, definitely. Most of the chapters are focused spatially. Most of those chapters are focused spatially around areas of the house or the car or just various different locations throughout my life that is, I don't remember a lot of my childhood, to be honest, but the few I do remember are very strongly located in places. So the images you saw on the poster of up behind the stairwell or behind couches are the most probably significant and formative, which I thought were important. For the sake of time, I didn't really go into all the chapters individually, but yeah, definitely each location also has a certain temporality that sets up progression of growth.
Read both of your works together. Well, these are.
I am actually working with I took a class with Oliver Meyer at the School of Dramatic Arts, and he was very helpful in this capstone project. This is my first play script. I don't think it'll be my last. I had so much fun doing it. But we are working on arranging a reading at SDA in the fall semester. So I will send it. Okay. And Brandon will email you.
I'll be off the radar.
Thank you both so much. Next up is Sophia talking about narrative medicine workshops for physical therapy students.
Hi, I'm Sophia. It feels weird. I'm Sophia. I actually went to undergrad here and graduated last year, and I'm currently doing the one-year master's program in narrative medicine. And I'll be off next fall to Northwestern University in Chicago for physical therapy school. Oh, thank you. I suppose to supplement my a little bit shorter presentation and a little bit less creative, as well as putting the narrative in narrative medicine, I wanted to open my presentation with a story about that happened while I was at work. As an aspiring physical therapist, I work as an aide at the USC Physical Therapy Clinic over on Marengo Street. It's a little bit of a walk, but it's over there. Back in January, I received a phone call from someone interested in scheduling treatment for arm tendonitis with one specific physical therapist who only works in the clinic a couple hours a week and doesn't usually take new patients. She explains further that she is a USC graduate student in the School of Music and plays the piano, and that one of her classmates specifically recommended him. This seemed really important to her, so I told her I'd check with him and get back to her, and she was willing to wait. A week passes before he finally responds to me that he can see her for at least an initial evaluation. I called her to schedule the appointment, which she did, and she actually recognized my voice when I checked her in for her very first appointment. And then I saw her every Monday afternoon since. Actually, 2 days ago, she came in thinking she had an appointment that Monday afternoon, but it wasn't actually scheduled, and we had a hard time tracking down the physical therapist. But I eventually spotted him and checked if he wanted to see her, which he did. Afterward, he kind of started having conversation with me about this patient. He told me how he was initially only going to see her for the first visit back in February, but learned that she had actually experienced a series of medical complications while working toward a doctor in musical arts, and that the very next day, or yesterday actually, was essentially an exam she had to pass or else she'd fail out of her program. He wanted to give her the opportunity to practice for and take this exam pain-free, so he decided to continue to treat her. He thanked me for tracking him down and allowing for one more session before that exam. While I don't think I necessarily need a master's degree in narrative medicine for this interaction to occur, I felt like I played a role in helping this patient even as just an aide. There was like something valuable to her story that I felt like I needed to just check with that physical therapist to see if he was open to the possibility of seeing her, and I'm glad he was. And I've learned throughout my experiences working and shadowing in physical therapy settings how story-driven and patient-centered this profession can be. As I finish up this degree and go off to Northwestern, I hope I can begin this conversation between narrative medicine and physical therapy, which is what my capstone is intending to do. I'm just going to give brief background for some of these lovely terms. So the medical humanities is an interdisciplinary field developed in collaboration with academics and physicians to offer new perspectives in the face of technological and cultural shifts within medicine in the 1970s. As medical school curriculum and journals developed surrounding these ideas, health humanities emerged as a term that was more expansive and inclusive of other health professions. Health humanities is an up-and-coming field within physical therapy, with an increasing in programming, journals, committees, and research in the last 2 decades, with cited benefits including mitigating burnout, improving patient communication, and increasing self-reflection. And then down to narrative medicine, which Dr. Schaff did a lovely job explaining before. It was founded back in 2000. It aims to improve healthcare through the use of narrative knowledge and skills in clinical encounters to deepen clinical knowledge and relationships with patients, along with other benefits. And then the narrative medicine workshop which I'll explain more about later, has been used as a method among medical students and like clinicians to teach and practice these narrative skills. However, there's little literature, if at all, about integrating narrative medicine with the field of physical therapy. Oh, that works now. Okay. So my main 2 objectives for this project was to establish whether the field of physical therapy can benefit from narrative medicine and investigate whether the narrative and like whether there are applications, and investigate whether the narrative medicine workshop is a useful pedagogical tool to teach about narrative medicine to physical therapy students, but also to see if it'd be effective in having physical therapy students practice narrative medicine skills within these workshops. So to start this work, I chose to host 2 narrative medicine workshop series for USC physical therapy students, 60 minutes each. They were each titled Where We Are, the first one, and Where We Come From, the second one. The workshop series blurb is as follows. As students and future clinicians, we often feel the pressure to focus on what's directly in front of us and what's approaching in the near future. These 2 workshops provide the opportunity to slow down, take a step back, and consider the bigger picture of where we are and where we come from. Both workshop texts were poems. For the first one, I used Wild Geese by Mary Oliver. For the second one, I used From Blossoms by Lee Young Lee. The workshop texts and themes were chosen based on preliminary discussions with physical therapists and faculty involved in the health humanities. Along with another co-facilitator in the narrative medicine program, I began each workshop with a quick introduction and discussion of narrative medicine and its potential applications to PT student experiences, followed by the traditional narrative medicine workshop. This includes reading, analyzing, and discussing, in this case, a poem, and then writing to a prompt inspired by the discussion. Participants were then provided an anonymous post-workshop survey with questions related to the discussion and narrative medicine workshop parts of the event. And then, so this is kind of like the overall structure of what happened. So I spent like around 15 minutes on the narrative medicine intro and discussion portion, then 10 minutes on the reading of the poem and having each person individually like look it over, annotate, take notes. And then we had another 15 minutes of text discussion, just talking about what we noticed and whatnot. And then we had 20 minutes dedicated to writing to a prompt and then having a couple people share what they wrote. So results, I was able to conduct both workshops. There were a total of 8 participants, 4 for each workshops. There wasn't any overlap between the first and second workshop. They're composed of mostly second-year physical therapy students, but we also had 2 biokinesiology PhD students and 1 first-year PT student who only can make the first 15 minutes of one of the workshops because he had class. During both discussions about narrative medicine and physical therapy, students talked about particularly meaningful patient stories they've encountered in clinical rotations and how stories in the clinic can be related to achieving and meeting milestones throughout the rehabilitative journey or process. Students had also mentioned how PT faculty often brought stories from the clinic into the classroom while teaching. While some of the discussion of the text went in unanticipated directions, all students actively participated in the workshop and most were willing to share their written work. And based on the 3 responses from the post-workshop survey, they all indicated they would attend another narrative medicine workshop. So I didn't scare them away. Yay. And then within the survey, I asked the question, do you think narrative medicine could have practical applications to physical therapy? If so, how? Just to see what perspective PT students would have gained based on our discussion. So out of these 3 responses, the first 2 respondents hadn't heard about narrative medicine until my workshop, while the last one did. You could take your time to read through them, but just to summarize, the responses indicated that they believe that narrative medicine can help clinicians see their patients beyond their diagnoses, contextualize a patient's overall experiences, and improve PT patient communication. The second survey response that said maybe also indicated in their workshop feedback that they would have liked to hear more perspective or information about how narrative medicine can be applicable in physical therapy settings. So then, based on perceived workshop participation and the limited post-workshop survey responses, I can tentatively conclude that the physical therapy student participants had an overall positive experience in the narrative medicine workshop. And the responses on the previous slide seem to indicate that there is value in exploring narrative medicine and physical therapy further. However, this project was limited by the number of participants and even more so by the number of survey responses, likely related to methods of event promotion and difficulties with scheduling workshops during a busier time in the semester. If we were interested in taking this project further, some ways to improve attendance could be additional faculty and division collaboration to better promote and schedule these events, and perhaps one-to-one interviews with participants could also be an alternative means of data collection due to the smaller sample size. And then based on the feedback we received from that one survey respondent, we could perhaps allocate more time to introducing or discussing narrative medicine and physical therapy. But overall, I think this project served well as a preliminary probe into exploring the intersection between narrative medicine and physical therapy students among PT students. Thank you. I'd like to especially thank the physical therapists I consulted on this project, including Dr. Sarah Blanton from Emory University, as well as Drs. Pamela Mickelson, Dee Dee Matthews, and Morgan Kelly from USC. And I'd also like to thank Dr. Schaff and all the other narrative medicine faculty, as well as my classmates for supporting me throughout working on this project and throughout this program. Thank you.
So our final presenter, Bright Zhu, is actually presenting their final project from our Methods and Pedagogy course. Dr. Zhu has been an attending in our Family Medicine department and enrolled this fall in the Narrative Medicine Master's program. Sadly for us, they are moving to the Bay Area and leaving USC, but we wanted to give them the opportunity to share a wonderful project, which I hope we will continue to collaborate on geographically apart.
Thank you, Dr. Schaff. Nice to meet everyone. I really appreciate you welcoming me into this space, despite not having had the full incubation time period of our capstone course. But yes, as Dr. Schaff mentioned, my name is Bright. I'm a faculty member in the Family Medicine department. I'm core faculty also in the residency program. And I do inpatient medicine, outpatient medicine. I've started our behavioral health clinic as well. And I also would like to start a story. I like that idea. So when I was a resident, specifically as a second year family medicine resident, I was in the Bay Area, trained at Stanford and San Jose, where my hospital was at that time. And I had learned about the Monterey Park shootings of 2023. And at that time, had never really been in LA, didn't really know where Monterey Park was, but as an Asian American, felt a deep call to that event. Showed up to clinic the next day. It happened, I believe, over the weekend. Yeah. It was a massacre that occurred in 2023 in Monterey Park of Asian Americans, primarily East Asian Americans, at an event fair or a fair or something like that. A dance hall. That's right. That's right. And so being removed from it in the Bay Area, I showed up to clinic the next day and was asked, like, how was your weekend? And I felt like this incredibly difficult event had happened that no one was talking about, right? And so the rest of the week, I had posed the question to a few of my faculty, did you all hear about this? Was this in the news? You know, we were in the Bay Area, this was in SoCal, but still in the same state. And everyone was like, no, I really haven't really, or maybe I heard a little bit. And when I asked for a space, not really having any background in narrative medicine at that time, there really wasn't a framework to provide that space. And I actually hosted a little Zoom call at like 8 p.m., like a vigil, basically. And I was like, I'm going to be creating this space as a busy resident. Anyone who wants to join can join. And only one of my like friends just hopped on. And so as I started faculty position, a lot of what I've been thinking about is how do we create timely, responsive, effective spaces for residents to heal, first of all, to process and to acknowledge and to make time for, and then ultimately to heal, hopefully, from timely current events. And I think these events can be global events, they can be internal events, you know, loss of a patient that has been shared across multiple residents, just any sort of timely events. And so when I was in my Med Ed 502 course, which is about designing the workshop, I was thinking about how can we tailor this workshop for residency programs? Who is best meant to lead them, the resident, the faculty, both? And what is the kind of like way to do that? Unfortunately, there have been many timely events that have happened since 2023. And so we've had many opportunities to put this into place. And I'm going to also struggle with it's real. This is a real, okay, perfect. So a little bit of introduction to myself. I also do a little bit of social media as the Gen Z attending, which I talked a lot about with our classmates in 502. So this is kind of a two-parter presentation. The first one is describing this two-part workshop that we've really built out in 502. And then the capstone project for that was thinking about how it might be expanded through social media and what would this workshop look like on Instagram and TikTok. So it's sort of like a twofer. Oh, this is the video. Okay, well, before I begin, oh yeah, well, why not? Let's just start with the video. Yes, so.
Are you feeling overwhelmed by the news, by your work, by everything that's going on, and you don't know how to process it? My name is Dr. Bright, and I put together a workshop based on narrative medicine that helps residents and faculty process together. The workshop structure itself is super simple. You read a short piece about what's going on, you take a few moments to write and respond to a prompt related to that piece, and then people share, and everyone just listens. That's it. People leave this intentional space feeling heard, grounded, and less alone, especially in residency programs where there often isn't a lot of time to unpack everything happening outside of medicine. And while it's not meant to be therapy or a cure for burnout, these workshops take stressful events and turn them into opportunities for connection. Its simple structure also allows the workshop to be quickly adapted and molded to help residency programs respond to current events. Patients, residents, and faculty are often talking past each other, and these intentional workshops provide a space for us to get back on the same page. My name is Dr. Bright. Does your program need more intentional and communal spaces to respond to current events? If so, comment below and follow me for more medical tips and tricks. LOL. That's at Gen Z Attending on Instagram and TikTok. Yeah, and so this is kind of the second part. A little bit of the orders out of date here, but let's talk a little bit about the workshops first, and then I will come back to discussing the social media component. So the workshop that I put together this semester, was in response to all of the ICE immigration and violence and episodes happening ongoing, but really culminating with the murder of Alex Preddy, an ICU nurse, and also Nicole Good, as well as many other less known Black and Brown folks. And so when that happened in the beginning of this semester, I was thinking about my residents, and I was thinking, here's a similar event from the 2023 Monterey Park shootings, and where are we, what are we doing now as faculty to cultivate spaces for residents to process it? And so we conceptualized 2 workshops. One workshop was focused on USC family medicine residents, a residency and faculty didactic, a 1-hour workshop using approximate text that we were reading for class, which I thought was really relevant. We lived happily during the war. And that one we co-led with Dr. Erica Wright for our residency program. It was part of a required didactic. And the prompt was, write about when you were enough. And I think a lot of the lessons that we learned from that workshop was that that this was a valuable space. Since then, I've interviewed several of the residents who participated. It was a valuable space. It felt almost like residents were not quite ready though. And that was something that I recognized also as a now faculty member with time to read the news, with time to process and sit with my emotions. I had more time to feel those impact of the news. Many of our residents' responses, and we were talking about this, Erica, where the prompt, write about when you were enough, people said waking up without an alarm was enough, right? Like eating food without having to scarf it down was enough. Just basic parts of residency training that just basic Maslow's needs and functions were enough. And it made me realize that even though I was still just recently a resident, now as an attending with the added time and autonomy and space, my processing of current events was still different than what residents were feeling in that moment. And so certainly part of that workshop development was a reminder that just because I might have been personally impacted by something that was facing my community doesn't mean that your average resident may be paying as much attention, or they may be paying attention, but it's just yet another mental task, mental load on top of everything else that they're doing. I will note that one resident did have to step out of the workshop, and when interviewed later, they said that it felt too close, right? And so there are definitely people who are still being impacted by these events, but perhaps the workshop itself, it literally happening, like 2 weeks, a week or two later, might have been too soon, right? And so rapid response, I think, is pretty interesting to think about how rapid and how much of a response. The second workshop was a virtual workshop, and this time it was aimed for all other faculty, family faculty across LA. There's a health equity learning network that I'm a part of, and luckily the facilitator of that learning network, Dr. Patty Pinanong, gave me some time to co-lead another workshop with her via Teams. And similarly in our workshop, we used a different poem from Deaf Republic, The Townspeople Watched Them Take Alfonso. And the prompt here was write about when you were silent. And it's just very interesting because here was a workshop with more faculty present. Everyone was so much more engaged. Everyone was much more excited and enthusiastic about taking it back towards their program. Here's the value of Teams is that you can actually capture the data quite easily. And so we read the poem, we annotated, Patty and I annotated based off of the close read that the audience was doing. And then as they responded to the prompt, write about
when you were silent, we were able to write down some like sticky notes. So I thought this was a great capture. That was a tip from Jonathan to be able to summarize and capture the data that we saw. So just some things that I'm pointing out, like when does silence have power? Is silence ever in our favor? How brave are we willing to be? A lot more time, basically, and capacity, I think, that folks had to grapple at the level that I was grappling with. And just recognizing, again, the power and privilege of being a faculty member, speaking to other faculty members, as opposed to a faculty member co-leading a workshop with another faculty member, to residents who may still be going on, part of a required didactic session that's going on. So those were the two workshops. The second portion was creating this social media dissemination, right? And so through social media, I've acquired kind of a following of mostly family medicine, medical students, residents, faculty, and asking them, would you do something similar, right? And actually, since presenting to you all, there's been more traction. People are now engaging with it. I think it just took a little bit of time for the video to show up on their For You page. And people are saying, yes, like I really want to see this. But again, just keeping that data point in mind that these are people who have time and capacity to be scrolling on their computer, on their phones, and receiving this information. So I would say overall big learning points for the two workshops is that certainly, as with all community health interventions, including as many members of our community as possible, co-facilitating with residents, and then leading forth with those projects. Actually, the final culminating thing that I will be doing for narrative medicine before I leave is actually running a narrative medicine elective for our residents. And so helping them select a text, understand the principles of narrative medicine, and then culminating with a workshop with the incoming interns will be kind of that final little moment of how we will do with that. Yes, and we'll chat with you also about if you would like to be involved, how much you would like to be involved. I know there's many other residency programs now where you will have to be doing the narrative medicine workshop for, but so narrative medicine continues the spread, the next steps, hopefully implementing across LA and Bay Area residency programs, training future faculty and residency co-facilitators, and yeah, more formal study of how rapid is too rapid and what sorts of responses are actually needed to ultimately help resident experience and well-being. Thank you.
Right. Questions for our.
Oh, sorry. I'm curious because you led these workshops with the experience having been a resident, especially quite recently, and if you think, I'm assuming you think it's valuable, but you think that's a necessity for this particular kind of workshop that they have with experience having on residency.
Well, that's a great question for also Erica, as someone who hadn't gone through residency, but also being able to co-facilitate. I think regardless of who is co-facilitating, one lesson learned is having a resident co-facilitate. Even I thought, like, being just a few years out, I should be able to communicate, but absolutely, I think just having a peer be a facilitator was a key lesson that I learned. And that's why these next workshops that I'm building out are hoping to have the residents do them for their own classmates that are coming in.
Kairos.
Sophia, it's nice to hear that you work with Dr. Sarah Blanton, who we've done a workshop with them. If you decide to continue this program, I wonder if you want to tap into like not just USC, but actually like the network that she has, because the journal for PT, like humanities, did you guys talk about maybe doing a workshop like virtually for a larger population, and would you feel comfortable facilitating such a workshop?
So Dr. Sarah Blanton is also a board member or founding member of the Journal of Humanities and Rehabilitation. It's based in Emory University, but I think they have a diverse number of people working with them. And they also have like a graduate student ambassador like program where one of the physical therapists, Morgan Kelly, she's already a PT, but also a PhD student in biokinesiology here. She's actually one of them. And they work, these graduate student ambassadors work with Dr. Sarah Blanton to try to bring like health humanities events to physical therapy and other rehabilitative therapy professions, I imagine. And yeah, I think I was reached out to recently about maybe potentially contributing to like an article for the physical therapy journal. And also I think yeah, I think I'm beginning to be involved in some of those conversations. I don't know how much I can do right now, but I hope I I hope to continue that work and work with Dr. Sarah Blanton and the Journal of Humanities and Rehabilitation. Yeah, perhaps as well. Bring it to the Midwest.
Well, I want to just commend all of our presenters today on beautiful work, so creative and so diverse in scope and theory. And so you all did a magnificent job, and I look forward to the future contributions you'll make to our field, collaborating with all of you. I'm thinking now about law school and narrative medicine. I think we got to work on that. So if anybody wants to continue a conversation after we close, please feel free. And thank you all for coming.